I'm not seeing any attendees just yet, so hopefully clicking start has worked. Here we go. Hi, folks. Welcome. We just started. It's 10 a.m. on a Friday morning. We're going to give people about 3 minutes to log in. So I think we'll get started with content right at 10:03. Just so we know that Fridays always mean things can get delayed. So thank you for being patient. We'll get started in just a couple minutes. Welcome. Hi, everybody. Welcome as you're coming in. It's nice to see you here. We're going to get started in now about 1.5 more minutes. So thank you. We just want to make sure that everybody can log in okay. We don't see any issues. You're going to see me every once in a while looking to my left, your right, and that's just because I have a second monitor where all of the chats, the question and answers, panelists, the participants, everybody's over there. So I'm just peeking over there every once in a while to see what we got going on. Okay, well, we are right about at just getting to 10:03. So why don't I at least jump in and say thank you for joining us. Welcome to the webinar. We are very excited to do this again. It's been nearly a year since the first time we held a Veterans and COVID-19 webinar. So actually, I thought as I was kind of preparing for this that I would take a step back and just had a bit of reflection. So it really was almost a year ago. So the LA County Safer at Home order went into place on March 19th, 2020. We've been joking in our Veterans Justice Center that January and February have been the fastest months of all time. But I think that's just because it's as if 2020 feels like it didn't really happen, or it was a dream. So it's been since March 19th that this has all started. And in preparing for this session, I read a newspaper article dated that date, March 19th, 2020. And it said, quote, 2 people had died from the coronavirus in Los Angeles County, end quote. And that really struck me how far we've come. I mean, first of all, it used the word coronavirus, which, now we rarely hear that term. It's COVID-19, it's vaccines. We have a whole new vocabulary. It talked about 2 people passing away from the virus. And now in Los Angeles County, we have 21,100 people who have passed away from the virus. So we really have come a long way over this last year, and you and I, our agencies, government organizations, the courts, everyone has adapted. And that's why we're back here again. In April 2020, we quickly adapted to give you the first version of this training. And we thought, let's, come back now nearly a year later and talk about what is the same and what has changed. So thank you for joining us today. You should be awfully proud at how innovative and adaptive your organizations have been. I know you didn't come here to toot your own horns. I'll toot it for you. So I know you came here to learn. So let's get into a couple of housekeeping items. First is you might see some live transcription happening below on your screen. If you don't want to see those words, you can turn it off. Just go ahead and navigate to the settings area of your Zoom, and you're going to see something that says live transcriptions. If you click on that, you have the ability to just hide the subtitles and you won't see them. If you're curious about something that was said and you want to just see it again, you can actually click that same button and ask to see the full transcript, and you'll be able to see everything that we've said that our live transcription has written out for us. In that same area, you're also going to see an opportunity to put in chat, to put in questions and answers, and we're going to be monitoring both things. This is going to be, by and large, for the first 45 or so minutes, we're really going to be doing more of a presentation style. We'll be paying close attention to your chats, to your questions, and we'll try to address as many of them as we can during the training itself, but we're definitely leaving at the end a designated time to hear more from you, your questions, things you'd like us to do more on behalf of the clients and communities that we serve together. So with that, let's talk a bit more about what's to come. So these are the big takeaways. We're going to start off again with stimulus payments. What's new? What are the updates coming both from the federal government and California? Then we're going to switch gears and talk more about government agencies with a special focus on the VA and on Social Security, and then dive into some of the big changes that are happening with the courts in our county. And then we're going to do a whole section on what we imagine a lot of folks have questions on, which is housing. How are the laws ever evolving and changing to try to promote some housing stability amongst the veterans that we serve? And then lastly, we'll end off with how do we collaborate together? We are your partner in justice, and we want to make sure that you know how to reach us and you know how to refer us to your clients and consumers. So with that, let's go ahead and jump. Here we go, jump right into a little bit more about us and then who today's presenters are. So thank you. We are, you're going to be hearing from us today. We're attorneys at Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, commonly known in the community as LAFLA. So LAFLA is a nonprofit law firm. We're the largest nonprofit law firm in Los Angeles County that protects and advances the rights of the most underserved. So we work really every day to level the playing field so that everyone has equitable access to the justice system and the rights that they're entitled to, as well as the benefits that they deserve. Every year, we provide free, high-quality legal services to about 100,000 Angelenos, and that's folks that are living in poverty across the greater Los Angeles area. And so we don't do this work in a vacuum by any means. Here you're going to be learning from Louis Strong, who is a staff attorney in our Veterans Justice Center at Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. He has primary expertise in all things government benefits, primarily veterans benefits, Social Security, and we did see a lot of questions about military discharge upgrades. So Louis can talk about that. He is our in-house expert on discharge upgrades. And then we'll transition to Mallory Andrews, another staff attorney in our office. Hi, Mallory. And Mallory is going to give us a wealth of information about housing. She is a fantastic expert, not only on housing, but on the intersections of housing and veterans' rights. So she'll be talking about that. And my name is Nicole Perez. I'm the managing attorney of our Veterans Justice Center. I have expertise in a number of areas, but I'm really here today to talk about what's happening a little bit with the courts and to just help facilitate today's conversation. But like I said, we might be the legal experts, but we are no means the experts of our clients' lives or what you're experiencing on the ground. So we are thankful that you've come to join us, and we look forward to our continued partnerships with you. This is a very important part of how we can reach the community. So with that, I just want to turn it over real quick to a couple of polls so we can see who's here today. So we have a few. The first is, you're going to see it on your screen and you can just go ahead and select it. What's your agency or organization type? And it looks like we don't have as many people yet who have registered, but I'm very happy to be able to talk with the people who are here. So I'm going to end the poll and we can see that by and large, you're from nonprofit organizations just like us. So nice to talk to sister agencies. So let's go to the next question, which is, what do you do? So we are all lawyers at a frontline law firm. Are you in case management? Are you more in administration? Are you something else that we didn't think of? Oh, I didn't launch the poll. That's on me. There we go. What most closely matches your position? And it's looking like we have quite a mix. some folks who are doing general direct services or case management, others who are focused on housing and administration. So I'll end the poll there and share the results. We have just a couple of more polls, so let's go to the next one. And this one is, what are you most interested in learning about today? So are you most interested in hearing updates on stimulus payments, on how the government agencies or courts are responding to this ongoing pandemic, to learn more about the updates with housing and eviction defense, or just anything and everything? You're open and curious? All right, so I'll end the poll there. It looks like it's no surprise to us. We kind of figured that most folks were going to want either housing or just a little bit of everything. So that aligns well with what we figured. And there we can see. And then I believe I have just one more poll before we get to the economic stimulus, which is, have you or your clients shared that they're experiencing problems getting or keeping their economic stimulus payments? This is not something that we have heard a lot of veterans contacting us for advice with. So we are interested to know, is this something that you're seeing in your organizations? All right, it's looking like on the line, most of you are saying no, you haven't been hearing about this. One of you has said yes. So what I'd like to say is, as I mentioned, we haven't really been hearing this as much either, but by no means do we think that that's because veterans aren't experiencing issues and or have questions about stimulus. So Louis, I'm going to turn it over to you to empower us with helpful information about what's going on with economic stimulus payments, and also to make sure that everybody knows how we can help when folks do run into problems. Louis?
Good morning, everybody. My name is Louis. I'm an attorney at the Veterans Justice Center at Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles. So first, we're going to talk about the 2021 federal stimulus payments. So at this time, President Biden's proposed $1.9 trillion COVID-19 relief plan is still currently pending. The House is scheduled to vote on their version of the bill today. There's going to be a little uncertainty at the moment because the bill has to be passed through a complicated process called budget reconciliation. However, it is expected to be passed sometime in March. The relief plan is expected to provide a third round of stimulus payments up to $1,400 for an individual taxpayer, $2,800 for a joint filing. It'll also provide an additional $1,400 for dependents. The eligibility requirements have yet to be finalized. However, it's likely going to be a phase out for individuals beginning at $75,000 for individuals and $150,000 for joint filers. Similar to how the first two rounds of stimulus payments worked out. This phase-out formula is going to be a little different this time around. However, your clients should not be affected. And then we can go to the next slide. All right. And now we're going to discuss the first and second stimulus checks that were passed out in 2020. According to the IRS, all payments from the first and second checks have already been issued. For some people, the checks from the second round of payments may still be in the mail. However, for those who ultimately did not receive one or both payments, in order to claim these payments, you will have to file a 2020 tax return, even if you're not required to do so. For the 2020 tax returns, there should be a section where taxpayers can claim what's called a recovery rebate credit, and that's where you'll be able to claim stimulus payments. The Form 1040 instructions will include a worksheet that'll help calculate the amount you're actually owed. And then for individuals who have already received the first and second stimulus payments and are on certain government disability benefits, there may be potential issues with eligibility if the stimulus payments have not been stepped down. So for individuals receiving SSI benefits, the stimulus payments are not counted as a resource for 12 months. However, beyond that period, the stimulus payments will be counted against the $2,000 resource limit for individuals and $3,000 for couples. So if the stimulus payment causes a beneficiary to go over the resource limit beyond the 12-month period, they may be deemed ineligible for whatever months the assets exceed exceed the resource limit, and they may be assessed an overpayment for those months. For individuals who are receiving VA benefits, the VA has determined that these payments will not count as income for VA purposes. However, if you are receiving VA non-service connected pension benefits, the payments will be considered an asset after 12 months. However, VA pension rules are significantly more generous than SSI, as the net worth limit is at a little over $130,000 for this year. And then we go to the next slide. All right, so next we'll talk about the California stimulus payment that some of your clients may potentially receive. So this past Tuesday, Governor Newsom signed a $7.6 billion COVID relief package. As part of that, the state of California will provide one-time payments of $600 or $1,200 to about 5.7 million Californians. So who's eligible to receive the stimulus payments? CalWORKs recipients will receive a $600 payment, and that's expected to, it's expected that they'll receive their payments sometime in mid-April. Additionally, individuals who receive SSI or SSP and SSV, I should say, that's the state supplementary payment, which is what California pays on top of the SSI benefit, and then CAPI, which is the cash assistance program for immigrants. These individuals will also receive a $600 payment. We don't know yet of any timeline as to when individuals under this category will receive payments. And then for everybody else who may be eligible, this will be dependent on filing a 2020 tax return. Individuals who are eligible under this category are those who qualify for the California Earned Income Tax Credit. If you earned less than $30,000 last year, you're eligible for this tax credit. This also will include individuals who file with individual taxpayer identification numbers, ITINs. These are typically undocumented workers who file taxes. So individuals under this category will receive a $600 payment. For individuals who file with an ITIN and earn up to $75,000, they are eligible to receive a $600 payment. And then for those who file with ITINs and also qualify for the state earned income tax credit, they'll receive a $1,200 total stimulus payment. This is to account for the fact that these workers were not eligible to receive the federal stimulus payments. And then for timelines when individuals under this category should expect to receive their payments, it's going to depend on whether they have a direct deposit set up. If they do, it should take about 4 to 5 weeks from the time they file their tax returns to receive payment. If they don't, it's going to take about 6 to 7 weeks for the check to come in the mail. We'll go to the next slide. So as I discussed previously, the details about the stimulus payments are going to be continued to be updated. You can visit our website for regular updates. In the meantime, I would encourage your clients to file their tax returns, as it may affect their eligibility to receive stimulus payments, at least for the state-based version. On the IRS website, there is a link that provides free resources to file tax returns for individuals who earn less than $72,000 last year. And we'll go to the next slide. If your clients have had issues with their stimulus payments being garnished or levied, LAFLA can assist. Outside of several exceptions, all stimulus payments are supposed to be exempt from garnishment and bank levies under Governor Newsom's April 2020 executive order. And then we'll go to the next slide. So now we're going to talk about updates for certain government benefits in light of the pandemic. We'll go to the next slide. Oh, we have a poll. So the poll asks which issues, if any, are your clients facing dealing with government agencies, and you can pick you'll have so if they have difficulty speaking with a representative, difficulty navigating application or appeals processes, delayed payments, overpayment collections, or other, or if they have no problems so far. So click on whichever issues that your clients are facing. All right, so the results show that majority of the audience, their clients are having difficulty speaking with a representative. There's also some issues with difficulty navigating application or appeals processes, as well as delayed payments. So we have been seeing these issues on a case-by-case the situation. So that's pretty consistent with what you've been seeing. So first, we're going to talk about VA benefits. All regional offices remain closed for in-service services, but veterans can schedule a telephone appointment with a VA rep at the LA regional office at the provided link below. We can go to the next slide. Benefit payments are continuing as usual, as are claims and appeals processing. Earlier in the pandemic, the VA had been exclusively setting up telehealth or video conference appointments for claim examinations. Gradually, the VA has started to schedule in-person claim exams. I would still say, however, that the majority of claim examinations are currently being conducted by phone or video conference at this time. And then from our understanding, all hearings held by the Board of Veterans Appeals are being done virtually. This can be difficult for low-income veterans, as this will require a computer and internet access. And then perhaps the biggest difficulty from the pandemic has been requesting records. There have been significant delays with obtaining military or VA records, particularly if the VA does not have an exigent circumstance. So for example, if they're homeless or dealing with a terminal illness, the agencies will expedite those requests. And then beginning January of this year, the VA resumed overpayment notifications for benefit overpayments that were suspended from April 3rd of last year through January 1st of this year. However, the VA has announced that they will continue to be flexible with veterans regarding their VA debts. This will include extending repayment plans, as well as providing waivers and compromises. Additionally, the VA will suspend collection efforts through October 31st, 2021 for veterans who request relief due to financial hardship. They can do so at the provided link. They can also contact the Debt Management Center for benefits debts, as well as the Health Resource Center if they have healthcare debts. We can go to the next slide. And then now we'll briefly discuss updates with Social Security benefits. Local offices remain closed for walk-in services, but individuals can schedule in-service appointments for certain services. This can include what's called a dire needs situation. So this will occur if you are without food, shelter, utilities, or medical care, and need to apply for or reinstate benefits, or if you have to pay expenses for food, shelter, or medical treatment, and you're unable to receive Social Security payments electronically. Benefits payments are continuing as usual, and outside of a few exceptions, you can apply for SSDI and SSI benefits online. In-person hearings before an administrative law judge are still suspended due to the pandemic. So these hearings will continue to be done by phone or video conference. And then the next slide. An important update for Social Security is that it has implemented a new rule late last year regarding waiver of certain types of overpayments that may have accrued during the pandemic. Essentially, Social Security has made it easier for people to request a waiver for overpayments of benefits received between March 1st and September 1st of last year. Social Security will assume that overpayments occurred during this period were likely the result of certain operations that were suspended rather than the fault of the beneficiary. So basically, all the individual has to do is contact their local office and request an overpayment waiver. The local office will then have to determine if the overpayment is eligible for this streamlined process, and if it is, the beneficiary is not required to provide evidence that they were not at fault. If Social Security cannot find evidence that the beneficiary was at fault, it will likely grant the waiver request. Next slide. So essentially, for all government agencies administering benefits, not a whole lot has changed since the early part of the pandemic. They still continue to operate on a remote-only basis, and applications and appeals are completed either online, by telephone, or over in the mail. However, a lot of this is subject to change over the course of this year. So for veterans experiencing issues with their government benefits, whether it be VA, Social Security, DPSS, or EDD benefits, LAFLA can assist. So now we'll move on to Nicole, and she'll discuss how the courts are currently responding to the pandemic.
Thanks, Louis. All right, so I'm going to spend some time with you to talk about courts, and here we go. So there has been phased court reopenings since really since the fall, in which the courts at some point were completely shut down. They were not holding any kind of court hearings. Everything was put on a continuance. But what we're seeing now is the courts have officially reopened for both traffic courts and eviction cases. We'll talk more about both of those in just a moment. Family law cases, small claims, and many civil cases are now remote only. Individuals can appear either via the telephone, or in some cases they may be able to appear by a kind of face-to-face conference, again, remote. And pre-conviction criminal courts, meaning folks who might be in custody or they're waiting to get a conviction or to dismiss their case, those courts remain closed. The court is continuing to do continuances for both the pre-conviction criminal courts as well as for juvenile dependency courts. So the other thing that is now having a phased reopening is when people need to go into court for a reason other than a court case. So we see this might happen where folks need to go in order to get a copy of their court records, if they need to schedule court appearances, if they need to drop off certain court documents. Now the courts are requiring that they do schedule an in-person appointment with the court clerk before they show up. And we've seen some occasions where folks are able to just walk in and the courts don't turn them away. But more often than not, I have heard individuals tell me that if they just try to walk in without an appointment, they're going to be turned away and told to schedule an appointment beforehand. And to schedule the appointment, you can go to the LA Courts website as shown here, and they're going to have phone numbers for all of the clerks that you can call depending upon the courthouse in order to schedule that appointment. So let's talk about traffic courts, because this impacts a ton of our clients. A ton of our clients are being cited for things like your standard traffic or moving violation. And a lot of our clients are also being cited for things like sleeping on the street, smoking in public, or other what we call quality of life offenses, because they may be experiencing homelessness. And so the courts have resumed in-person traffic court appearances. I know a lot of clients are scared to go into court for these, but they have no choice. So individuals do have the option to appear virtually for their arraignment. And their arraignment is essentially where they're going to plead guilty or not guilty. If they plead guilty at the arraignment, they're going to get a sentence at that point, like to pay a fine or to do community service, or even in some cases to just waive the fines and fees outright. But if they say not guilty, they're going to have a trial, and the trial must be in person. And again, there's no way around that. The trial is where the police officer who cited them gets the opportunity to show up, and then they tell their case about what happened. The police officer gets an opportunity to then present it as a witness, and then the court renders their decision. So if the client wants to go through the traffic court process, they're ultimately going to have to appear for that trial. Yet there are still other options if they want to bypass the court process. So there are court paperwork that can be completed to request dismissal of the ticket, to request reduction of the fines and fees. There's probably about 5 different ways that an individual can try to address their different types of traffic tickets. So summary is, we're not going to get into all of those, but if your client does not want to have to go in person to court, or even if they just want legal help, send them to us. We can help with all ticket issues. The other thing that we see a lot of our clients are looking for help with has to do with clearing their criminal records. So this is getting an expungement. This is reducing a felony down to a misdemeanor. This is sealing arrest records. The courts are still, for the most part, closed in terms of in-person appearances for clearing criminal records cases, but they're absolutely making decisions. So we see regularly, we are filing a ton of these all the time. The courts are returning timely their orders on these cases, granting these expungements, these felony reductions, and sealing arrest records. So we definitely want folks to continue to exercise their rights to clear their criminal records, even if they're not going to have a face-to-face appearance. So we can help with that. Send them our way, just letting you know that the post-conviction criminal courtrooms are open, even though they may not have to go in person. And then that takes us to eviction courts. So the eviction courts have reopened. There was a time in the pandemic that the only eviction cases that the court would see had to do with emergency situations, like the client was a threat to the health and safety of the landlord or their neighbors. But now we've seen that change, and now all eviction cases can be seen with in-person appearances, though there are times when the court may accept virtual appearances. And just to let you know now, and we'll say it again and again, LAFLA can defend veterans when they're facing unlawful detainer, which is just the legal phrase for they have an eviction court case. So I am going to turn it over to Mallory now to tell us everything we need to know about all of the numerous changes that keep happening. Eviction law is by far the most evolving of everything we're talking about today. And before we get there, let's do one other poll about what you're experiencing with housing. So here we go. Mallory, I'll leave it to you.
Okay, so we just want to know, what types of housing issues are your clients facing these days? Is it about their ability to pay their rent, landlord harassing them, having problems with their neighbors? Obviously, there's a range of issues that people are facing right now, being forced to stay at home, and with the financial impacts of the COVID pandemic. Okay, and it looks like the biggest things that we're seeing are problems paying rent, problems locating housing, and issues with the landlord either harassing tenants or not making repairs. So we'll talk a little bit about all of these issues during this portion of the presentation. We can go ahead and go to the next slide. There is a web of tenant protections that are currently in place at different levels. We have federal protections, state protections, and local protections that vary depending on where your client is living within the county of Los Angeles or the state of California. The first thing we want to talk about, though, is the state protections, because those are by far the most robust. So we can go to the next slide. In August of 2020, something called the Tenant Relief Act was passed. You may have heard about this as either the Tenant Relief Act or AB 3088. To qualify for protections under this state law, tenants first have to have a financial impact due to COVID-19. And this can either be a loss of income or increased expenses that are directly related to COVID-19. The second thing that they need to do is they need to submit a declaration to their landlord about that financial impact. Under the Tenant Relief Act, there are two different covered periods, and those different periods have slightly different requirements and different protections. So that first period starts in March 2020 and goes through August 2020, and that's AB 3088, that first bill that was passed. Recently, another bill was passed called SB 91 that extended a lot of these protections through June of 2021. And so the second covered period is September 2020 through June of 2021. And we'll talk about what protections exist for both of these two periods and what the tenant has to do to get protected for rent under both of those covered periods. Next slide, please. So this first period, March 2020 through August 2020, that's that period covered by AB 3088. The biggest thing you need to know is that your tenant, your client, this tenant has to submit a financial declaration to their landlord to take advantage of the protections under the Tenant Relief Act. If your veteran submitted one of these declarations for this covered period, they cannot ever be evicted for this unpaid rent for this period from March 2020 through August. If they did not submit a declaration, landlords could have started to file those evictions on October 5th of 2020. It is still possible, for your veteran to file one of these declarations. If their landlord hasn't filed the eviction yet, let's go ahead and get them to submit a declaration to their landlord. The other important protection under this period is that eviction judgments are masked, right? So if your veteran is going through the eviction process, they don't have to worry about this eviction judgment becoming public and future landlords, knowing about that eviction or being able to screen them and find them on the tenant registries, which is a huge, huge protection for a lot of veterans and tenants who are going to be facing evictions during this pandemic. Next slide. So the second period under SB 91, that continuing legislation, this is the period from September through June of 2021. The big takeaway here is, again, your tenant has to submit a financial declaration to their landlord. But the second requirement for this period is they also have to make a minimum rent payment of 25% of the rent. And that's 25% of the rent for this covered period, those months from September through June. If they pay at least 25% of their rent by June 30th of 2021, they can never be evicted for the remaining 75% of that balance. Something to note for both the 75% balance and the covered rent from the previous period is that while they can't be evicted for this unpaid rent, it is still a rental debt, right? It's a valid debt that the landlord can try to collect in other ways, through small claims or through a private lawsuit. But again, these judgments are masked. If the landlord doesn't receive this minimum rent payment, that 25% payment, they can start filing evictions on July 1st of 2021. So if you have a vet who is having trouble paying their rent, make sure they submit one of these declarations, and also make sure that they're saving up to make this 25% payment. And those payments can be made either on a monthly basis or at the very end, right? They can wait until June 30th and make one lump sum payment. So they have some time to save up for that. Next slide. So before filing an eviction, if your tenant can't pay the rent, if your veteran can't pay the rent, the landlord has to give a 15-day notice to pay or quit. And that's different from normal law, right? Normally it's that 3-day notice. Now they get 15 days for any rent under this entire covered period from March 2020 through June of 2021. When the landlord gives one of these 15-day notices, they actually have to include one of those sample declarations about financial impact for the tenant to complete. But in general, we're recommending that your tenants should not wait to get one of these notices from a landlord. If they know they're not going to be able to pay their rent for any of these months, they should go ahead and submit a declaration ahead of time. You can get a copy of one of these declarations at our website. Next slide. One of the great things about this new continuing legislation, SB 91, is that rental assistance is coming. Obviously as veterans, they have access to SSVF programs, but there is a more robust rental assistance program coming through SB 91. And there's two different options under this program. The first is it's an 80-20 program where these funds will pay up to 80% of the rental arrears if the landlord waives the remaining 20%. It is a voluntary program, so the landlord has to actually sign up for the program. But one interesting thing is that if the landlord refuses to participate and they later sue your veteran for that back rent, a judge can consider their refusal to participate in the program to determine what actually the landlord should be entitled to recover in that lawsuit. So they may end up reducing the amount of rent that your veteran owes to the landlord. The second option, if the landlord refuses to participate in this 80-20 program, is just a straight 25% rent payment that will be given to the tenant to make that rental payment if the landlord refuses that 80%. One great thing about this is that this 25% payment can actually be used to satisfy that minimum payment that's due by June 30th. And right now, we don't have a ton of details on how this program is going to be unrolled, but those are coming. And there is going to be a sign-up process that will be established. Next slide. The next most important protection that tenants have is at the federal level. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, months ago, you may have heard about this, passed an order prohibiting evictions for tenants who have been financially impacted by COVID for non-payment of rent. So this order was recently extended through March 31st of 2021. Same as the state law, your tenant actually has to submit a declaration of financial impact to their landlord. And once they do this, their landlord cannot evict the tenant until after the end of March. Financial impact is more limited at the federal level than it is at the state level. So it has to be either a loss of income or significant medical expenses that are directly related to COVID-19. They have to seek out rental assistance too. They have to, part of the declaration is attesting that they've, tried to find all sources of rental assistance that they cannot pay, and that they're trying to pay whatever they're able to pay. One of the main differences between the CDC order and, the Tenant Relief Act at the state level is that, once this covered period is over after the end of March, landlords actually can file evictions for the covered rent. So, if your tenant is eligible for the CDC order, they are probably also eligible for the Tenant Relief Act protections too, and those are going to be more robust and more protective. Next slide. Local protections also exist. They vary quite a bit depending on where your veteran is living. In Los Angeles County, obviously there are 88 cities and approximately 140 unincorporated areas. So you're going to want to find out, in my veteran's city or in my veteran's area, what are the protections that are available there? In the city of Los Angeles, we have very strong protections, and the city ordinance is in place until 90 days after our local emergency period is lifted. And so right now that's indefinite. We have no idea, when we're going to lift the emergency status. So it'll likely be months longer before the city's ordinance is lifted. Within the city of Los Angeles, no fault evictions are prohibited. So if your veteran has a landlord who's trying to remove the unit from the rental market, or move in on their own or something like that, they can't do that. It's not allowed. The other thing that's prohibited is at fault evictions for a couple specific reasons, right? If your veteran has somebody living with them, an unauthorized occupant, or a pet living with them, an unauthorized pet, because of the pandemic, they can't be evicted for that. And they also can't be evicted for any nuisance that's directly related to COVID-19. Importantly, landlords cannot charge any late fees or interest on late payments during the, the COVID covered period, and again, this is a much longer protection. It's going to be 90 days until after the local emergency is lifted. Originally, the city's ordinance did have some rental protections as well, but those have been preempted by the state law. So that Tenant Relief Act, state protections are going to cover any veterans who are unable to pay their rent. But if you have a vet who's being evicted for another reason, those city protections or other local protections might help them. Next slide. Outside of the city of Los Angeles, outside of the incorporated city, there's also county protections. And these county protections are in effect for all unincorporated county areas, plus any incorporated cities that don't have these minimum protections, that don't at least meet the county protection level. And so for the most part, most cities throughout Los Angeles County have just let the county protections take over. Long Beach used to have its own ordinance. It's lapsed, and they're just relying on the county protections for its guidelines. So the city of LA is really the main one that has its own separate ordinance to protect tenants. Right now, the county protections last until June 30th of 2021, and this was just extended a couple of days ago. So they have been pretty good about, as the pandemic is continuing, continuing to extend those protections. Hopefully, if this is still going on by the end of June, we'll see another extension there too. Like the city ordinance, the county protections prohibit any no-fault evictions. So same thing, landlord wants to remove the rental unit, landlord says the lease is over, anything like that, they cannot evict for it. And also same as the city protections, no at-fault evictions are allowed for those unauthorized occupants, pets, or nuisance that are related to COVID-19. Other things that are really important from the county ordinance, the landlord has a limited right of entry into the unit, right? Normally they're allowed to give that 24-hour notice to come in, but there's some very, very specific reasons why the landlord can enter right now. And generally it's for, emergency maintenance purposes or tenant request. They really can't just be coming in and out of your veteran's unit for no reason. There are no rent increases allowed in the unincorporated county. This is also the same in the city of Los Angeles. There's no rent increases until this period is over, and no late fees or interest on that late rent for the covered period. Next slide. One thing you might be thrilled to learn about, we talked about in that poll how landlord harassment has become an issue, and we're seeing this increase, more and more as this pandemic goes on, and landlords aren't getting their rent. They're turning to other ways to try to get their tenants to move out, right? Maybe coming in all the time, calling your tenants all the time about where's my rent, when are you moving? Within the county of Los Angeles, there's protection against that now. Originally, when the county board had passed this, they said it was prohibited, but this new extension from a couple of days ago, there's now penalties involved, right? Up to $5,000 a day. We're not really sure how that's going to be enforced yet. We're waiting on that language, but presumably that'll end up being something where your tenant, your veteran could end up suing their landlord if their landlord violates these protections. And the list of prohibited behaviors is pretty long, right? And it's comprehensive. Things like the landlord refusing to cash a rental check if they're just sitting on your client's rent. If they're coming into the unit all the time and abusing that limited right of entry, if they're refusing to perform repairs and maintenance, if they're threatening your veteran, or even giving them, notices to quit that have no basis in law and are illegal, and a ton of other reasons. So if these things are happening now within the County of Los Angeles, there are strong prohibitions against this kind of behavior, and really strong $5,000 a day is quite a strong deterrent to this kind of behavior too. Next slide. So these protections have been changing, right, at the federal, state, and local level. We've seen them extended and changed multiple times throughout this pandemic, and we expect them to continue changing and evolving as the pandemic goes on. It's very possible that these end dates will be extended, and if as things are improving, we'll finally start to see some end dates as well, especially for that city ordinance that doesn't have a defined end date. You can visit our website for regular updates, but if your veterans are getting eviction notices, if they're having problems with their landlord, go ahead and refer them to us, have them call us, apply online for assistance, and we can walk them through all these protections.
Mallory, we have one question that I'm wondering if you can answer now rather than at the end. It has to do with timing of when the tenant should provide that declaration. Should it be at the start of every month? Should it be when rent is due? Is there a specific parameter to keep in mind?
So they can give it at any time, but generally we're recommending that they submit one of these declarations every month when rent is due. That's the best protection that they can get, is send that declaration in every month. If their rent is due on the 1st, go ahead and just send that declaration in before the 1st.
Okay, thank you so much. So that is a lot of really good and detailed information about housing. Let's wrap up and then turn to you to just talk about who we are here, how we partner with you to ensure that our veteran neighbors are getting the access to justice that they need. So we talked a little bit about who we are at Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles, but I also just want to say that we have a very special program at Legal Aid, which is our Veterans Justice Center. Lewis, Mallory, and I are all attorneys within our Veterans Justice Center, which means every day we exclusively serve low-income veterans and their families to obtain life-sustaining income, health, and housing benefits, as well as to rebuild their lives through our work with expungements, citation defense, and military discharge upgrades. This is what we handle. We want to be very transparent, and you can actually see this list on our website, so no need to memorize it, but we do all things related to tickets, whether that's, traffic moving violations, the non-moving violation tickets that you can see, as well as parking tickets. We can help veterans to reinstate their driver's licenses and clear all of their criminal records, as we said before. We do all of the government benefits. So if that's an income benefit, a health care benefit, food benefits, as well as subsidized housing benefits. So that transitions us to, again, we can help with housing and eviction defense. So that is keeping them in a safe and stable home, as well as preserving their subsidized housing vouchers to the best we can. We don't help folks with actually paying out their rent. We don't have any rental assistance programs within house, but we do partner with SSVF agencies. We have a very long-term partner with US Vets' SSVF Inglewood program, and we always make sure that veterans know that that resource is available to them and how to access it. And we do military discharge upgrades. We did see some questions from folks wanting to know more about military discharge upgrades and how those applications might have been impacted by the pandemic. So last thing that we do is debt and wage. And then I'm going to come back a little bit and ask Lewis to tell us a bit more about what's happening in the world of discharge upgrades. But before we get there, to just wrap up what we do handle is we help with child support arrears. So if veterans owe back child support, we can help take care of that. We handle student loan debt, so getting a lot of veterans to have their student loans discharged or waived. And we can help with employment issues, whether that be unemployment benefits or wage and hour problems. So Louis, can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in the military discharge upgrade world? How is the pandemic impacting this, if at all? What's your take?
Sure. So for timelines, I haven't noticed a difference since the pandemic. It usually takes about 15 to 18 months to get a decision, and that's still the case. However, if it does, the discharge does get upgraded, it may take a while to get a new DD-214. So I've seen up to 4 or 5 months before we get the new DD-214. So if it gets to be that long, I would actually suggest that that you contact the veterans local congressperson's office and try to see if they can facilitate the DD-214 request. I would say the biggest change since the pandemic would be at least some of the discharge review boards have allowed for telephonic hearings. Before, if you wanted a hearing, you'd have to go all the way to DC, and not a lot of veterans could afford that. So now you can do it over the phone. From what I've seen, from what I've heard from other attorneys who have done these hearings, they haven't said very good things about it. The board members will ask really hostile questions to the veteran. So they haven't recommended it to me so far.
Unmute, unmute. Okay, thank you so much, Louis. That's really helpful. It sounds like not a ton of changes. We're still looking at a pretty long-term process from the moment of application through the moment of when the different discharge upgrade boards make their decisions. So thanks for sharing your expertise. So let's talk a little bit about what we do not handle. So this is all of the things that we do, which you can see is quite a bit, but there are some things that we don't handle. We don't do family law unless domestic violence is involved. So of course, as we mentioned before, we can handle child support arrears, but if veterans owe current child support, or if they're looking for help with divorce or modification of custody agreements, those are things that we're not going to be able to handle unless the veteran is experiencing domestic violence. We can't help with bankruptcy or tax issues. Again, for veterans who are looking to get those stimulus payments, we do want to make sure that they file their taxes and get them over to one of those volunteer income tax assistance programs, which we have the link for you in the materials. We can't help folks who are currently charged with a criminal case other than a traffic ticket. Only the public defender can help with those types of cases. And none of the personal injury or business transactions that you might see advertised on buses or on TV. And lastly, we can't help at this point with estate planning. But the important thing is that no matter what, even if it's something that we can't assist with, we will always make sure that the veteran gets an appropriate referral, or at the very least, some basic legal information. So no one ever leaves us empty-handed. And really, the other thing that I want to emphasize is that we also would never expect you to determine really if it's an area of law that we handle, especially if it's not clear. Like if you have a veteran who's looking for bankruptcy help, that's pretty clear we're not the right place. But if you're not sure, or you just want to defer to refer, our big hashtag of defer to refer, then there's many ways that a veteran can access our services. At this point, our offices remain closed to the public, so we don't have any in-person offices or clinics that folks can walk into. Our website will let you know, and we'll send out emails when that changes. But nonetheless, a veteran can always just call our 800 number, and when they call, they're going to speak with a live person who's going to route them to the correct place, as well as determine the level of urgency in which they need legal help. And lastly, they can apply online. And in fact, you can help folks apply online. They just go to our website, as you see here, apply, and they'll get a response no later than 3 business days, depending upon the legal issue and when they apply, and even be, in fact, much sooner than 3 business days. And the last thing that I just want to plug, and then really feel free to throw in your questions, your thoughts in the chat or in the question and answer section, is I want to plug a couple of things. One is we have been doing a lot on Facebook during this pandemic, not just within our Veterans Justice Center, but within legal aid as a whole. You can find multiple Facebook Live events happening throughout a month. And those Facebook Live events go into more detail about what you heard today. We're doing fairly regular Facebook Lives on housing since that law is changing constantly, as well as Facebook Live events on other topics. And again, that's not just with our Veterans Justice Center, that's across the board. So we've done ones on employment, unemployment insurance, and so on. But our Veterans Justice Center has also recently started something we're very excited about called Basic Training. And these are going to be short monthly videos really speaking to veterans themselves to let them know some things that we've seen time and time again that veterans are having questions with. So it's going to be the third Friday of every month. I believe it was just last Friday, we did our first ever series that Mallory did. It was about 7 minutes or so on housing and recent updates for veterans on housing. And so you'll be able to see all of those videos on our Facebook as well as watch them live on our Facebook. I also want to plug our YouTube. Our YouTube is where all of these videos that happen live on Facebook, as well as other things like animated videos that we've created, Know Your Rights videos, all of that is available on our YouTube. And then lastly, our website, which we've kind of plugged throughout this session, is a great repository of information and resources, both for you and for the veterans that you serve. So all of these things, please check them out, but we are also here for you. So this training has been recorded. We are going to be sending out all of the information to you so you have access to all of the links as well as our contact information. So look out for that coming on Monday. And with that, we have about 4 or 5 minutes left. So if you have any questions or any thoughts, please throw them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you and know what you want from us. If you'd like us to do more of these types of webinars, we'd love to know that. If you'd like more targeted webinars, we'd love to know that too. So let me give you a moment to see if anything comes through the chat. And it looks like I'm not seeing anything more than the few questions we've already addressed at various points throughout the webinar. So I'm going to give us back 4 minutes of the hour and again say thank you from both Mallory, Mallory Lewis and myself. We thank you for joining us this Friday morning for this continuing conversation on the ways that the courts, agencies, and LAFLA is responding to the pandemic. We are here for you and the veterans that need us. Please reach out and thank you. Mallory Lewis, any closing thoughts? Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful Friday and weekend.